name is Marcus Nilsson, and I want to show you a bit of how I do reactive programming with React and Most.js. Most.js is kind of like RxJS, but a bit smaller and a bit faster, or much faster, I've heard. So, my code is based on the Create React app and React Storybook, and let's see here. Basically, I'm just going to show you how to make a button, some kind of a bit smarter input field with 2 buttons and a form. Right now, the styling will look like crap because I'm not interested in that right now, just the proof of concept. Okay, so here we have 3 buttons. If you click on them, it will glow for half a second and then stop glowing, and that's done with a state change. So there's no kind of animation stuff going on. We just click, and half a second later we go to like an unpressed state. So it's kind of a variable that says, is it recently pressed? Yeah, true or false. And each button here contains its own state and set of actions. So the only reason that only one button changes its state is because the reactive way of doing streams is we have a set of action streams that goes combines together into one state stream, and that set of action streams and the state stream is bound to an instance of your component. So we don't have any problem with containing the state or isolating the state in one instance of a button. So it's possible to send an action to the specific state for that component. And that's really powerful. It's much simpler to make small isolated components that are still extensible. Because somehow we want this button to be agnostic of what it does higher up in the hierarchy. So for example, if I have this input here, and I write some text here, and like, maybe I don't want that text, and I want to press cancel, the text disappears. Because this component here is a composite of 2 buttons that this composite input has as children. So it has 2 buttons as a children, and on its own level it extends those 2 buttons with an input field, and the buttons still have its own local state and it glows in their own way, while we still react to the state change when we press something. Okay, and also we want to be agnostic about who actually activates the action. We don't care if it's like from the console or some kind of API call or mouse click or whatever. So what I can do here is press enter. You see it glows. And if I do ABC and now press escape, you see the text disappears and cancel glows. So now we can make the same actions with the mouse or with the keyboard or through some kind of API and automate things like test scenarios and that kind of stuff. We actually isolated our application model from the view. And of course, we can go further and have some kind of form where we input our first name, save that. Oh, that's the wrong spelling, wrong again. There we go. And so on. So it's not that hard to make composition of really small components up to something really powerful. And you get both the isolation, but also the extensibility. So here, if we look at the actual application, we have a reactive router that I just basically made up myself from through some just like code snippets. It's not that advanced, hence the hash sign here, because I'm not that good at making routers. But that in its turn uses another component that's a page component that just has a set of components. And we're on the login page now because that's the default page. But I can go to the landing page that I haven't done yet, and we see that it changes the route. I could actually set the route back to login. So you see here, I have the router, which is currently is the kind of app level component, the highest component of them all. So that's the entry point. So on router, I have a set of actions, and I have triggers and streams. So triggers is kind of the action creators. And I have an action creator or trigger named setRoute, which just takes string, login. See, it changes here. We change the page. It doesn't care who produces that signal. If we do it from here or do it from the console, doesn't matter who produces. And also we can of course go deeper into the component tree and access something further down the tree. So let's say that we want to write something in here. I think I have the snippet here. We go to routers, children, which is the page component, which has a login component, which has a form component, which has an email component. And now we're down to the email field. And here we can trigger an update with the value of Marcus Nilsson at Gmail, or Marcus Nilsson 82 at gmail.com. Okay, so look up here, we get the text. And the same thing, like we can save and cancel and do everything like that from the API as well if we wanted to. And right now it's not that impressive as a product, but I do believe that we can use lots of the stuff that Dan Abramov has done with Redux, but in a reactive way, and get more kind of native benefits, because we don't fight with imperative tools doing something that's really subscription based. Because when you think about it, the Redux store is actually a big chunk, like a really big component that is reactive. You call dispatch, something happens with the dispatch, and you output a new state. But in here, like every small component, every button is its own Redux store, you could say, that you can combine with other Redux store and still get that global application control, but also that isolation and extensibility. And the code, I know that when you look at like Ben Lesh and the other guys talking about RxJS, and that it's kind of hard. I mean, it's much simpler going with Redux. But for me, when I began, the Redux docs, and they still say that you could do Redux in a couple of lines with RxJS or something like that. So I kind of got fooled that RxJS was much simpler than Redux and started doing RxJX. And going back from RxJS and most.js into Redux, it kind of sobers you up that the simplest tool is the tool that you're used with using. And we shouldn't focus that much on being like new stuff is hard. I mean, if you just stay a bit open-minded, most of the stuff that we use in RxJS and most JS and other reactive tools, it's like perfectly analogous to Redux and React programming. So let's see a component here. And the button is real simple to begin with. If you just look at this, we have some kind of set of actions, our state, which contains reducers, and if we look here at index.js, I have no business logic here at all, only import everything that this button component needs to form its model. So this part is not the view part. It has nothing to do with React yet. It's only the model, non-graphical part. And I always start each file with a create function. So think of it like react.create class. Or if you do Node, like http.create server, you always have that create function so you can get a new instance back. And I destructure everything so it's not positional arguments, it's named arguments instead. It's just simpler to debug and not as brutal code. And everything that's uppercase here is uses the same pattern. So actions here, you call actions, you actually call actions creator, and you get back the actions instance here on the left. And async here is basically just subject if you've done RxJS before. Look at it. So this is our reactive code. If you think of this as dispatch, that's basically it, with maybe like, what do you call it, action type. I'm not the best Reduxer yet. I'm doing it at work. It would be like press. But then you would also need some kind of ID somehow to point out like which button. And we don't need to do that because our .next call here always goes into the direct instance. Okay, and then I export the trigger, and I also export a stream that you can subscribe to or map or filter or whatever you want to do. So it's only one action here on the button. You can only press it. But if we looked at the state, you see here, I take the press stream, I underscore the streams. I hope I've done it on everything I will demo here. We start our state with some initial states, and we only have the state of is recently pressed. And if we go back, if it's not recently pressed, it looks like this. If it's recently pressed, it glows. And we have two reducers, the press reducer and the unpressed reducer. And it will set is recently pressed to true or false. Once we have the reducers done, and you see here, delay 500. That's the important thing here, that since we're using asynchronous tools for doing asynchronous code, it's as easy as pie. It's one line. It's so simple. And that's something that can be a bit complicated if you don't use reactive tools. And here we just basically scan is the same as reduce but over time. And we just call some kind of reduce function with our state, and we get a new state back. Okay, and with that state, we have some kind of component model. Now, when we want to do it with React, I want to make something, some kind of component model viewable. And then I have another create function here, and it's an index.js file, so there's no logic in here, only composition to increase testability. And here we can see that we inject the model into our viewable factory. I think that whenever you see the word create, you can think of the factory pattern. And the only thing that this one does right now is extend it with the view. So you can see here, I use Lambda to merge instead of object assign, and it adds the viewable keys onto the model, but in an immutable way. And the view, we will send in React. We have Aphrodite for rendering the CSS, and we get style sheet here and CSS for Aphrodite. Connect observer is a helper. That's basically the only thing that's framework-ish here that I'm using. And I won't actually go into that right now because I haven't solved all the nooks and crannies with most JS, so I don't want to give the wrong impression right now. I will show the file later though. Actually, I can do it now. Basically, in the connect, we just have a, let's call it smart or fat or whatever you call it, but stateful React component. And on did mount, we subscribe to our state stream, and it receives the state stream and a pure render view, and it will send the state, the model state via props to our pure view. And this is the hack that I probably don't want to use in the future, but anyhow, it won't be more complex than this. But I want to use pure renders throughout my code, so I want to use a helper to kind of get the connection, imperative connection away. So in our view, we can just see that mostly I'm importing stuff here. I have about a bit of setup for the styling. That should be in its own file, of course. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. And then we have some kind of function or synthetic event handler, like React event handler here. And I usually do it like this in the beginning, so I can debug. Right now, we could just do it, press trigger right away, but I usually do it like that. And we get the model state in here. As soon as it changes, we will get here, and we can style it according to our state, and we will see the output. Okay, so that's basically it for the button. And it will just kind of continue like that and not be that much harder. But we can see in the input that we create a set of children. And that's so when we compose, our actual vanilla JavaScript code will make up our component tree, so we can access every component state in the same way that Redux does it, but we will be able to access the buttons actions as well. And since we do this kind of composition, you still don't lose that same way. Like if you want to know when you press a button, not just an instance like any button, you can actually do that as well, because you have control of everything, and you can just say add some property here. Let's say labels. You just add like type button, and now you can traverse the entire tree and get everything that's a button. And you're a bit freer here to add any kind of middleware that you want, and just extend away. And that's basically it. And this was just a demonstration of doing simple component development with most.js, but it's basically the same as with RxJS or any other reactive library, and hooking it into React. I quickly just glanced over some patterns I used to make it more testable, and isolating some kind of side effects. I can actually show you the router here. that I kind of get some stuff into it, so I know I can extract away everything that's imperative, like how you change the route and what should happen to the browser when you change the route. So you can have imperative and side effects, imperative side effects, but still contain your own, like, inside the domain code in a pure manner. So it's very, very simple to test. Okay, that's it for now. And if you want me to present something about this, I'll clean up the appearance a bit more, both me and the code, I guess. Yeah, basically that's it. And I hope you enjoyed the presentation and thought it was a bit cool. And I have a lot more of stuff to share with you if you give me a chance to hold a presentation. Um, I don't think it will be appropriate for a lightning talk, but maybe, like, say 20 minutes and upwards to half a day is something that's appropriate for this kind of material. I have much more code, but it's closed source, so I can't really uh, show you that until I've made some open source alternative with it. But we also did some cool stuff in a previous project with WebSockets and communicating kind of like sending really, really small actions up to the server and getting a response back, and having read-only stores that get live updates. So you can work in some kind of dashboard and actually see live what everyone is doing. And that's pretty awesome. And that's something that I will code this next month. So that will be ready pretty soon. Okay. Thank you for watching and listening. Bye.